Everybody on board?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, friends. Welcome to this 33rd webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. Previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series that you're looking for. Okay. During our last webinar, we began our analysis of J.A. Knapp's symbolic portrait of Hermes Trismegistus. Our consideration of the ibis sacred to Thoth led us to this page and led us to this image. So let's start with a quick review of a passage from the Secret Doctrine, which specifically references this frieze from the Temple of Philae. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll start it out. Let him turn to some most suggestive Egyptian bas-reliefs. One especially from the Temple of Philae represents a scene of initiation. Two gods, hierophants, one with the head of a hawk, the sun, the other ibis-headed Mercury, Thoth, the god of wisdom and secret learning, the assessor of Osiris, sun. They're standing over the body of a candidate just initiated. They're in the act of pouring on his head a double stream of water, the water of life and new birth, which stream is interlaced in the shape of a cross and full of small ansated crosses. This is allegorical of the awakening of the candidate, now an initiate, when the beams of the morning sun, Osiris, strike the crown of his head, his entranced body being placed on its wooden dowel so as to receive the rays. Then appeared the Hierophants initiators, and the sacramental words were pronounced ostensibly to the sun Osiris, addressed in reality to the spirit sun within, enlightening the newly born man.
Okay, thanks, BL. It's interesting, HPB was overshadowed by the masters, and so we get sometimes information, if you believe that to indeed be the case with HPB, if you believe in her source, then we get information that wouldn't necessarily be available, otherwise, like this idea that that the candidate is placed on this wooden dowel so as receive the morning rays of the sun. It really adds to the understanding of what was going on. So after last month's webinar, Scott Thayer emailed me some comments on this frieze, and Scott, if you would could read your own comments. I've lightly edited them, but it's more or less intact.
All right.
It's a series of slides, so.
Right, all right. The Ankh and the Wasp scepter are symbols of the two initiators. The Ankh was Horus, with Horus and the breath of life, true life. Now the symbol for Venus, the source of our undying souls. And the Wasp was the stylized ibis head, and thus Thoth. The initiate is bound across the chest, as Hermes Trismegistus is in the frontispiece of this chapter. It is not as elaborate or advanced on the initiate as on Hermes Trismegistus, suggesting perhaps he's akin to a fellow craft or entered apprentice, not a master mason. The binding crosses over the heart and lungs of the man, thus perhaps binding together the heart, Ankh, Venus, soul, second logos. And the lungs, Was, Isis, bird, Mercury, mind, air. Third logos. He looks like a boy, especially in size and face. There's a similar Greek scene of an initiated boy before Demeter, which suggests that this initiate is one of the little children, new to this ethereal reality, like one of the little children saved from the Pharaoh's wrath, and other mentions of children in the New Testament, who were in fact disciples and early initiates, new to the ancient hierarchical realms of being. As I recall, the wasp scepter of power was usually depicted as being held upright next to the ear or inner ear, thus associating it with balance and uprightness, like the junior wardens in the South Masonic plumb mine, meeting the earth perpendicularly. The symbol is also considered a depiction of Seth, earth, dark, material power, versus the Ankh of Osiris, immortal divine breath and spiritual rebirth and power. I think this pair of symbols can be pitched at various levels, as is common with the Egyptians.
Thanks, Scott. It's some great insights on this. Any thoughts or questions about Scott's ideas? By the way, I looked all over to try to find a depiction of it, of the wasp being held next to the ear or the inner ear. I couldn't find it. Often at the same level of the ear, but not actually up by the ear that I could find. If you run across an image like that, you could send it to me. But okay, thanks, Scott. I invite anyone who has an idea on the subjects that are being covered to email me with your comments, and I'll include them like I did for Scott in the next webinar. Okay, the next statement and MPH's commentary on Knapp's illustration is: the lower circle contains the dog, an animal always associated with Hermes because of its intelligence and devotion. Anubis was the Egyptian dog-headed god, also associated with Sirius, the dog star, whose staff was crowned by the was, or vas, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, symbol just mentioned. Note the life-renewing Ankh in his right hand. Both Hermes and Anubis were conductors of souls, which led to the creation of the combined deity Hermanubis. Could we get a reader for this? I have no idea why this outline is around the text, but anyway.
Lynn?
There you go.
Lynn, can you,
Bull,
there.
the dog, and the goat are the three symbolical animals of Hermetic magic, resuming all the traditions of Egypt and India. The bull represents the earth or salt of the philosophers. The dog is Hermanubis, the Mercury of the sages, otherwise fluid, air, and water. The goat represents fire and at the same time the symbol of generation. The planetary star of Thoth was Mercury, who is Sut Anubis under his planetary type. But there is also a lunar Mercury or Herm Anubis. The passage of Sut into the lunar god Thoth is represented by Hermanubis, i.e. Hermes Anubis, a title attributed to the second Hermes, the first being Sut Anubis, the Mercury of the dog star, as well as of the moon. Mercury was the Egyptian Sut Anubis who passed into Thoth, or Hermanubis, in the lunar stage. The double visage of black and gold is identical with the bird and the gold hawk of Sut Horus and Sut Nukti.
Yeah, any thoughts about this? Any questions? You know, one of the teachings on Hermes Trismegistus and Hermes in general in Egyptian times is that there was a first and second Hermes, and one associated with the solar aspect or the pure spirit, the source of the second incarnated Hermes. and who was the actual teacher among humans. And he was the one that's considered thrice great. So you see, references to both here, the planetary star, as well as the master of Hermetic magic. Note the really unusual caduceus here. So both Hermes and Anubis are connected with the dog star Sirius, which was symbolized by the five-pointed star. Could we get a reader for this?
Greg, can you read that for us, please? I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Is your headset muted?
Can you hear me now?
Here we go.
Yes.
Okay. Originally, the blazing star of 5 points represented Sirius, or the dog star, the forerunner of the inundation of the Nile, the god Anubis, companion of Isis in her search for the body of Osiris, her brother and husband. Then it became the image of Horus, the son of Osiris, himself symbolized also by the sun, the author of the seasons, and the god of time, son of Isis, who was the universal nature, himself the primitive matter, inexhaustible source of life, spark of uncreated fire, universal seed of all beings. It was Hermes also, the master of learning, whose name in Greek is that of the god Mercury. It became the sacred and potent sign or character of the Magi, the Pentalpha, and is the significant emblem of liberty and freedom, blazing with a steady radiance amid the weltering elements of good and evil, of revolutions, and promising serene skies and fertile seasons to the nations after the storms of change and tumult.
Thanks, Greg.
Tumult.
Yeah. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. Next, upon the forehead of Hermes appears the Uraeus, the secret symbol of the constellation of Scorpio, which represents the regeneration of the same power that in the form of a dragon lies helpless underfoot. Interesting quote. The Uraeus, as we'll discover in the Secret Doctrine, is not itself the serpent of Scorpio, which Alice Bailey tells us in the Labors of Hercules is the, quote, serpent of matter or illusion, the nine-headed hydra that must be overcome, akin to Typhon. But the Uraeus is a symbol of the energy that animates all life, including personality life. Actually, the scorpionic symbol that best represents the energy of the Uraeus is probably Aquila, the eagle. If you have a different understanding or opinion about this, you're always welcome to share. So for an esoteric interpretation of the role of the Uraeus, let's turn to this passage from late in the Secret Doctrine, the first volume, which also reveals the true identity of Osiris. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first I'd like to say that Greg's hand is up.
Okay. Greg?
I was looking at the pentagram, which is the 5-pointed star, which is also representative of Sirius. And right now I'm studying the integration of the seventh ray into the focus. And in that process, it's about orientation is the key word. And when we work with orientation, we have to find ourselves at the center of the pentagram. I think this is the same pentagram that they're kind of relating here, is an identification with the seventh ray in some way coming in the modern day, but also probably back then, because they always cycle through.
Yeah, well, a couple of key thoughts you had there are the point at the center, which would represent the will aspect, the one in the 1 and 7 of the seventh ray. So you have the outer demonstration, you could say, of the energies, and the inner source of that demonstration, and that is really the MO of the seventh ray, to bring that the highest out into manifestation, which is that central point of the 5-pointed star. You know, 5-pointed star is also a symbol of the perfected human being. You know, the 5th initiation is a master of wisdom, who is considered to be the perfect human before he graduates completely into the next kingdom. And also we know that the 5-pointed star flashes over the head of the initiate. Let's see, I can't remember which initiation. I know it progresses. You have first the 5, then the 7-pointed star, and then the triangle, I think at the 7th initiation. So this is, I'm not sure exactly, maybe one of you know. So yeah, those are my comments on that. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Yvonne, can you read that passage for us, please?
Sure. Before Osiris became the one and the highest god of Egypt, he was worshipped at Abydos,
Right.
as the head or leader of the heavenly host of the builders belonging to the higher of the 3 orders. The hymn engraved on the votive stela of a tomb from Abydos, 3rd register, addresses Osiris thus: "Salutations to the Osiris, elder son of Sib, thou, the greatest over the 6 gods, issued from the goddess Nu, primordial water, thou the great favorite of thy father Ra, father of fathers, king of duration, master in the eternity, who, as soon as these issued from thy mother's bosom, gathered all the crowns and attached the Uraeus, serpent or nausea on thy head, multiform God, whose name is unknown and who has many names in towns and provinces. Coming out from the primordial water crowned with the Uraeus, which is the serpent emblem of cosmic fire, and himself the 7th over the 6 primary gods issued from Father, Mother, Nu, and Nut, the sky. Who can Osiris be but the chief Prajapati, the chief Sephiroth, the chief Amshaspend, go ahead, or Mazda. The Egyptian word nausea reminds one a good deal of the Indian. The serpent god Brahma, of Shiva, of Vishnu, are all crowned with and connected with Nagas, a sign of their cyclic and cosmic character.
Yeah, secret doctrine at its best, huh? So, you know, one reason that, so first of all, we learned that Osiris is what's called the chief Prajapati. Said another way, you know, if those of you who do the secret doctrine, I think it's many of you, this is that being who's the one who emanates as the 7, Oyaohu the younger, and there's many other names, Brahma, right, in the Hindu, and then becomes, you know, and that's the father of the fathers aspect. He's the father of fathers, who are the creator gods, the 7 who then come forth, right? Yeah, so it's just, to me, amazing how closely the Egyptian form reflects the Theosophist teachings. Any thoughts about this? Some good stuff here. Right? Why are they all crowned with the nausea or the uraeus? Because they are all informed by cosmic fire, right? Which is the source, the deity source, right? So whenever you see, an Egyptian pharaoh or god who has the uraeus on his forehead, it's an indication that they are one with this cosmic energy, that they are impersonally directed by these higher sources. Okay. So let's see my notes here. The uraeus, let's see. Okay. So for an esoteric interpretation of the role of the uraeus, let's take a look at this passage. Wait a minute, sorry, got lost here. Yeah, so key here is the phrase, the uraeus, which is the serpent emblem of cosmic fire. Okay, one more passage, and notice this great uraeus here on this Osiris being, sorry, the head of the god Osiris. So could we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. We must, moreover, remind those who try to prove that the ancient Egyptians knew nothing of and did not teach reincarnation, that the soul, the ego or self of the defunct, is said to be living in eternity. It is immortal, co-eval with and disappearing with the solar boat. That is, for the cycle of necessity. This soul emerges from the Tao, the realm of the cause of life, and joins the living on earth by day to return to Tao every night. This expresses the periodical existences of the ego, Book of the Dead, 160, don't know.
Right, don't worry.
The shadow, the astral form, is annihilated, devoured by the uraeus. The manes will be annihilated. The two twins, the fourth and fifth principles, will be scattered. But the soul bird, the divine swallow, and the uraeus of flame, Manas and Atma Buddhi, will live in the eternity, for they are their mother's husbands.
Beautiful passage. Any questions about this?
We have a comment from Greg. He says, perhaps even in and he did this prior to this, but sorry, perhaps even in Maya mythology, the serpent god is reflective of Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, the serpent is always dual. You have, let's see, let's get back here to this image. You have the lower serpent in Egypt called Apophis. There are other names, right? This is the serpent that St. George is seen overcoming, right? He slays this serpent. This is just a metaphor for overcoming personality in such a way that you're able to relate to the soul, right? That's essentially what's going on here. And then you have the higher serpent, which is representative of the monad, of cosmic fire, as shown here. You see his little uraeus here, right? And the source of deity. Okay, so see, I think we're down over here.
And then Yvonne says, why is the head so elongated there?
Oh, well, if you read certain sources, it would be because he's extraterrestrial, right?
Have you been watching Ancient Aliens?
You got to do something in your spare time, right? A lot of times this is my opinion, that what is attributed to aliens is really hierarchical in its orient, or in its origin. Like in Atlantean times, DK tells us that all of their science, they had flying machines, they had a number of scientific understandings, but not the Atlanteans themselves. It was the initiates from the hierarchy that at that time literally walked among humans. So my belief is that that's the source. Now, there was a 60-minute interview where we're not going to go too far down this very long passage, but just to say this extraordinary interview with a Navy pilot who said that he saw aliens ships on his radar every day for like a 2-year period. And that there's, absolutely no doubt in his mind that they exist. So there is also that, how you put those two together. Well, that's up to you. Now, as to what this represents, first of all, I think it shows the complete development of the crown chakra and the 1,000-petaled lotus, and possibly the center, which is often described, that lies above that. And notice that this is like a circle with a point in the center, which is the origin of this uraic, which is also phohatic energy, right? That then manifests, it looks like, in the ajna center, which is that point of enlightened personality consciousness. So I particularly like this sculpture. There's none quite like it that shows this, right? But there is probably a secret of initiation that also describes, this shape. You see it a lot with the gods, the Egyptian gods. Okay.
Okay, and then Greg, going down that same garden path, Greg says in Chariots of the Gods, produced in 1970 or so, they relate to these concepts of ETs. Wasn't that a book, Van Daken or something, that was based on? Anyway, he also says they may also be associated with the sky gods of the Native American teaching, etc.
Yeah, and that's all we'll say about that. Okay, but thanks for that, Greg.
And then Yvonne says, so the circle is the monad?
The circle is in the microcosm, the field of monadic influence. The point in the center is always the source of monadic reality, which, the monads live in the sun, which is another way of saying that they're one with the solar logos in terms of source, right? So microcosmically, the circle represents the field of expression of the monad, and the point in the center, the source of its being. Okay, anyone else? Of course, when you have a god like Osiris, who is the quote unquote chief Prajapati, then this source becomes the first logos himself, right? The whole thing is pitched onto a cosmic level. And then all of this represents manifestation. I haven't counted these. I always love to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, yeah, the 14 is a really common number in Egypt for representing the 7 within and the manifested 7 without, which would be a totally appropriate number here. And then you have the infinity sign, and it's all animated by this energy of the Uraeus or phohatic energy. Okay, any other thoughts? It's great stuff, isn't it? Okay, So next we have the 3 points of the tail of Typhon, which end in arrows, indicate the 3 destructive expressions of universal energy: mental, moral, and physical perversion. This exactly correlates. Where'd it go? Where did my thing go? Oh no. What did I do? Delete my illustration? Sorry, guys. God. Let me see here if I can find it. Okay. All right. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so it exactly correlates to the 3 sets of 3 heads of the scorpionic hydra described in esoteric astrology, which we see here. If you count them, there's 9 heads in this Egyptian base. And the first 3 are the physical, quote unquote, perversions: sex, physical comfort, and money. The second are the astral, which he calls moral: fear, hate, and ambition. And the mental perversions are pride, separativeness, and cruelty. So as soon as you, and famously in the labors of Hercules, the cutting off the heads of these individually, actually 3 grow in its place. So suggesting that you can't deal with these on the plane where they exist. You have to, the way Hercules ends up completing this labor is to lift the entire serpent out of the swamp in which it lives, which is the 3 personality expressions shown here, and then it dies all at once, right? You lift all these into the next realm. It's similar to the idea of the cleansing the Augean stables, where you have to divert the river, which represents soul force, into the personality in order to cleanse it. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple of comments here. Efrosini says the deadly cobra is the Buddhic principle, which ultimately destroys all mortal bodies.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That's a, it's a very first ray metaphor, the serpent. It's phohatic in its principle. It always relates to the force of deity on the material realm. We have it in the nature of the first 3 planets, Pluto and Vulcan, right? That they dredge out that which has to be destroyed. So yeah. So the cobra is a terrific example and is held in great reverence just for that reason. It's it's a symbol of Shiva, the first ray Lord. Anyone else?
Yes, Yvonne says in reference to the the hydra here, and she says we rise by kneeling.
Yeah.
And lifting it, and then lifting it up in the air.
Yeah, and well, the idea of kneeling is, it's a metaphor for humility. When I was in the Great Pyramid in Egypt, I don't know if any of you have, I know some of you have seen this. It's very interesting that the entrance into the king's chamber is something like 28 inches tall. You have to get on your knees, unless you are the world's limbo expert. You have to get on your knees to get through there. And it seems to, in itself, be a metaphor for how you need to enter, the Holy of Holies, So, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so any final thoughts on the commentary on this this figure. A lot here. It's just an illustration. It's not a piece of fine art, but you know, there's a lot of great material associated with this. Okay, then on to the chapter entitled The Life and Writings of Hermes Trismegistus. It'll take us 2 readers to take us through this first long paragraph. So if we could get a reader for this, please.
Michelle, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Thunder rolled, lightning flashed. The veil of the temple was rent from top to bottom. The venerable initiator, in his robes of blue and gold, slowly raised his jeweled wand and pointed with it into the darkness revealed by the tearing of the silken curtain. Behold the light of Egypt. The candidate, in his plain white robe, gazed into the utter blackness framed by the 2 great lotus-headed columns between which the veil had hung. As he watched, a luminous haze distributed itself throughout the atmosphere until the air was a mass of shining particles. The face of the neophyte was illumined by the soft glow as he scanned the shimmering cloud for some tangible object. The initiator spoke again. The light which ye behold is the secret luminous of the mysteries. Whence it comes none knoweth, save the master of the light. Behold him. Suddenly through the gleaming mist a figure appeared, surrounded by a flickering greenish sheen. The initiator lowered his wand and bowing his head, placed one hand edgewise against his breast in humble salutation. The neophyte stepped back in awe, partly blinded by the glory of the revealed figure. Gaining courage, the youth gazed again at the divine one. The form before him was considerably larger than that of a mortal man. The body seemed partly transparent so that the heart and brain could be seen pulsating and radiant.
Okay, a new reader, please.
Catherine, can you read for us now?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
As the candidate watched, the heart changed into an ibis and the brain into a flashing emerald. In its hand, this mysterious being bore a winged rod entwined with serpents. The aged initiator, raising his wand, cried out in a loud voice, "All hail thee, Thoth, Hermes, thrice greatest. All hail thee, Prince of Men. All hail thee who standeth upon the head of Typhon." At the same instant, a lurid, writhing dragon appeared, a hideous monster, part serpent, part crocodile, and part hog. From its mouth and nostrils poured sheets of flame, and horrible sounds echoed through the vaulted chambers. Suddenly, Hermes struck the advancing reptile with the serpent-wound staff, and with snarling cry, the dragon fell over on its side, while the flames about it slowly died away. Hermes placed his foot upon the skull of the vanquished Typhon. The next instant, with a blaze of unbearable glory that sent the neophyte staggering backward against a pillar, the immortal Hermes, followed by streamers of greenish mist, passed through the chamber and faded into nothingness.
All righty, any thoughts or questions about this? There's some good metaphorical stuff in here. The whole idea of rending, where does it say? Yeah, the veil of the temple was rent from top to bottom. DK talks about this, and it suggests the movement from the 3 realms of human endeavor into the Buddhic plane. In fact, the hierarchy shifted upwards from the higher mental onto the Buddhic plane. It's described as being in 1875, between that period, 1875 to 2025. I mean 1925, which is, an extraordinary piece of teaching to get. But the reason was, and he literally describes it this way, that it allowed for a direct transmission from the ethers into the hierarchy, because they relocated, you could say, into the fourth of the four cosmic ethers, right? And that was described as renting the veil being the lower three worlds, right, from top to bottom. So this place is where all of this occurs, right? A lot of 6-ray, style in this, but there's some good stuff. We won't go into a deep analysis of this, however. Any thoughts or questions about anything in it? It seems to be a description of this illustration in many ways. It talks about, him placing the foot on the lower dragon, et cetera, et cetera. All righty. So entertaining, somewhat fantastic in the original meaning of the word. But I'd like you to take a look at this passage from the Secret Doctrine for a more esoteric revelation of Hermes. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
The dragon was also the symbol of the Logos with the Egyptians, as with the Gnostics. In the book of Hermes, Pymander, the oldest and the most spiritual of the Logoi of the Western continent, appears to Hermes in the shape of a fiery dragon of light, fire, and flame. Pymander, the thought divine, personified, says, "The light is me. I am the nous, the mind or Manu. I am God. I am far older than the human principle which escapes from the shadow, darkness, or the concealed deity. I am the germ of thought, the resplendent word of the Son of God. All that thus sees and hears in thee is the verbum of the Master. It is the thought, Mahat, which is God, the Father. The celestial ocean, the aether, is the breath of the Father, the life-giving principle, the Mother, the Holy Spirit, for these are not separated, and the union is life."
Yeah, so any thoughts about this? Very rich passage describing deity in terms of mind, the mind or Manu, nous, right? This is the higher principle of the soul. Well, really the higher principle that informs the soul, right?
Francis?
Yeah.
I didn't get to it in time, but Efrosini referenced the previous slide, says this triple dragon reminds me of the three-headed Cerberus who guarded the gates of Hades that all the heroes had to face in order to return consciously to the upper world. It is perhaps the destruction of the thought form of the personality.
Yeah, and it's the same triplicity, right? It's the physical, astral, and mental personality sheaths that are represented by those three heads and by this three-pronged tail. That's a good reference. Thanks for that.
And then Anne Veronica says nous is the Greek word for mind.
Yeah, there you have it, right? So yeah, here we have it, right? I am the nous. But this is a lower mind. This is source of mind, which you get in Manu, right? See anything else here? The resplendent word. Okay. So let's take a look at the illustration at the center of the page, which originally appeared in Historia Deorum Fatidicorum, published in 1675. Could we get a reader for this, please? And I'm going to use that illustration because it's just a little finer than the one that appears in the Secret Teachings.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Master of all arts and sciences, perfect in all crafts, ruler of the three worlds, scribe of the gods, and keeper of the books of life, Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the 3 times greatest, the first intelligencer, was regarded by the ancient Egyptians as the embodiment of the universal mind. While in all probability there actually existed a great sage and educator by the name of Hermes, it is impossible to extricate the historical man from the mass of legendary accounts which attempt to identify him with the cosmic principle of thought.
Yeah, any thoughts about this? So this description conflates Hermes, the incarnated avatar, with Pymander, the quote, oldest and the most spiritual of the logi of the Western continent, which appears to Hermes in the shape of a fiery dragon. Thus, it could be argued that it was Pymander who was, quote unquote, ruler of the 3 worlds, whereas Hermes would be a master of, in those same, would be a master in those same 3 worlds, you know, ruler over and a master of is different connotations. One's a more cosmic role. So with this understanding, we recognize in Hermes the avatar or embodiment of the logi called Pymander. And this is, you know, originally this is told as the first and second Hermes. And, you know, so you have the embodiment of the first intelligencer. Any thoughts about that?
Yvonne wants to know, was he one of the masters?
Oh, he certainly was a master. Yeah, and in fact, he was a great Egyptian avatar. So he would be, you know, very highly placed in the hierarchy. You know, he reintroduced science, writing, the different forms of education, magic. So it seemed to be along the 3-5-7 line of masters, just exactly what Ray Master he was. I wouldn't be able to say. Maybe, you know, since the 3rd holds within it, you know, the 5th and 7th, you could maybe call him a 3rd Ray Master. It's hard to say.
Efrosini says the scribe of the gods has a distant reference to oh, she wants to know if it's a question. Does it have a distant reference to Lepika's?
Well, not even that distant. You know, if you think of the function of the scribe, it's to materialize the plan. That's what the Lepikas did, right? It's to turn the purpose or the intent of deity into the plan, right? So you have the will, the purpose, and then the plan. And so a scribe is a metaphor for, ultimately is a metaphor for that same function. Yeah, and I'm also thinking, you know, of course, he's very much associated with Mercury, which is, as we know, the 4th ray god. So, but it's in terms of what he actually manifested at that time, it seemed to me to be along the 3-5-7. So, you know, I haven't figured that out yet. If any of you have any thoughts about that, that'd be great. Okay.
Yvonne has her hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Along those same lines, could he be the new 7th Ray Master?
let me think about that. He is the embodiment of the universal mind, you know, and the seventh ray aspect of that would seem to be a more specific part of that universal third, fifth ray quality. You know, we have Rakowski, you know, as a seventh ray master who became the third ray lord of civilization. So it's, who knows?
So there's a vacancy.
Maybe, you know, I haven't, like I said, I have no inside track. All we can do is you know, consider based on the teachings given us, you know, but it's, you know, it's really emphasized, you know, like when you go back to SD's quotes, you know, here, you know, that it's so oriented towards the mind of matter. I am nous, I am the mind of matter. And the Son of God is also, you know, the Son of mind. So it's definitely oriented in that third, fifth ray place. And of course, Mercury is very much connected with the mental aspect on higher levels. Okay. So next up.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Greg says in terms of monad, he would be representative maybe of Manu.
Well, Manu is, you know, it says right here, I am Manu, you know, where is it? Yeah, I am the nous, the mind, or Manu, right? This is from the Secret Doctrine. So there is that connection, but Manu is generally, you know, it's the head of the first ray department, the first department, right? The Manu, just as the Christ is the second ray, and the Lord of Civilization is the third. But, you know, that's not other than, this all falls along this line of, you know, 1, 3, 4, 5, 7. I included the 4 because of the Mercury aspect of the, which is the planet that Hermes is associated with. Okay. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Janet, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Suppositions concerning the identity of Hermes. I am Oblicopus averred that Hermes was the author of 20,000 books. Metotho increased the number to more than 36,000. See James Gardner. Figures which make it evident that a solitary individual, even though he be overshadowed by divine prerogative, could scarcely have accomplished such a monumental labor. Among the arts and sciences, it is affirmed Hermes revealed to mankind were medicine, chemistry, law, art, astrology, music, rhetoric, magic, philosophy, geography, mathematics, especially geometry, anatomy, and oratory. Orpheus was similarly acclaimed by the Greeks. In his Biblica Antigua, Francis Barnett says of Hermes, if God ever appeared in man, he appeared in him. As is evident both from his books and his Pymander, in which works he has communicated the sum of abyss and the divine knowledge to all posterity, by which he has demonstrated himself to have not only an inspired divine, but also a deep philosopher, obtaining his wisdom from God in heavenly things and not from man.
So in short, an avatar, right? Any thoughts about this? Okay, we're going to go through this one. First up, Iamblichus averred that Hermes was the author of 20,000 books. Manetho increased the number to more than 36,000. So James Gardner. After a thorough search, I'm pretty sure that there was no 19th century author named James Gardner. Almost surely MPH was referring to J. Gardner Wilkinson, who wrote 3 volumes on the manners and customs of the ancient Egyptians. But in my opinion, the best quotes on the subject come from Isis Unveiled and the Divine Pymander. So could we get a couple of readers, please? A reader for this, please.
Okay, I'll start it off. The 42 sacred books of the Egyptians mentioned by Clement of Alexandria as having existed in his time were but a portion of the books of Hermes. Iamblichus, on the authority of the Egyptian priest Abaman, attributes 1,200 of such books to Hermes, and in Manetho 36,000. But the testimony of Iamblichus as a Neoplatonist and Theurgist is of course rejected by modern critics. Manetho, who is held by Bunsen in the highest consideration as a purely historical personage with whom none of the latter native historians can be compared, suddenly becomes a pseudo-Manetho as soon as the ideas propounded by him clash with the scientific prejudices against magic and the occult knowledge claimed by the ancient priests. However, none of the archaeologists doubt for a moment the almost incredible antiquity of the Hermetic books.
Okay, so the numbers in question, but not the ancient source of this. Okay, and a reader for this, please.
Lynn, please.
The numerous books upon theology, astronomy, and medicine are ascribed to the second Mercury, the son of Vulcan, who, according to Eusebius, lived a little after Moses, that is, about 50 years after the exodus of the Israelites. This learned author, relying upon the authority of Manetho, reckons that this second Mercury is he who was surnamed Trismegistus, or thrice great. According to Manetho, this second Hermes or Mercury, translated from engraved tablets of stone that had been hidden in the earth, the sacred characters written by the first Hermes or Mercury, called Thoth, and wrote the explanation books which were deposited in the Egyptian temples. He thus established a divine authority, obtained a high degree of respect among the people, and was long revered as the restorer of learning. From the tables of the first Hermes, he is said to have written as commentaries and explanations an incredible number of books. These books, according to Clemens Alexandrinus, amounted in number to 42. It was impossible for the Egyptians to carry their veneration for them higher than they did. They were borne in their processions with great ceremony and respect.
So it could well be just like, the studio of artists like Peter Paul Rubens, where, he had a number of artists that he worked over. And it could be that there were many at his time disciples that wrote books that further explained what these 42 original books were putting forth. Okay. Any thoughts about these ideas? So again, you have the idea of the 2 Hermes, right? So,
Yvonne's got her hand up.
go ahead.
It's me again. So is he the reincarnation of the first Hermes?
No, I think it would be more like a overshadower. It would be like the Christ and Jesus kind of a thing. He would be that great being, a high master who overshadowed an incarnating avatar. That's my understanding of this, right? And that higher being is associated with the planet Mercury itself.
Thank you.
Also with Thoth, the first Hermes is associated with Thoth, who we saw in the very first, let's see, it's number 41. In the very first slide, we see him as this initiator because he's taken on the divine qualities of the ibis, right? I see Scott's hand.
So this one lived 50 years after Moses. Now the first Thoth, when did he live?
Well, my understanding, gosh, did he incarnate at all? We don't know.
Okay. Are they extraplanetary avatars?
Yeah, or a great, the Christ didn't incarnate at the time of Jesus, right?
No, he just overshadowed, yeah.
He overshadowed. So we could have that kind of a situation. There's no specific teaching that I have found that describes this, but we certainly have the model, which is the higher overshadowing and providing the cosmic impetus for the actual avatar, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott's got his hand up, but Efrosini also says, can we think that these books were about the teachings of the Egyptian mysteries?
Certainly. Yes, they would be, that which could be published at the time were certainly included that. But there are also, books on healing, books on magic, which could very well have to do with the mysteries. Books on astronomy, astrology, etc. We're actually going to get to a description of the books themselves. That's coming up.
Okay, Scott, you want to go ahead?
Yeah,
Go back to the slide we're on here. Here we go.
in Isis, HPB says this about Hermes in the introduction. It says there were two Hermes. The elder was the Trismegistus, the second an emanation or permutation, in quotes, of himself, the friend and instructor of Isis and Osiris. Hermes is the god of the priestly wisdom, like Mazeus.
Like who?
Mazeus, Mazeus. I'm not sure who that is. Maybe Mazdian, perhaps. But anyway.
Yeah, it's a name I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So,
That says Kabbalists identify him with Adam Kadmon, the first manifestation of the divine power, and with Enoch.
yeah. So you have, again, this association with the Manu, that Adam Kadmon, the first man, that's that Manu principle. So, very possibly that's exactly his source, the Manu of that time, and then the incarnated master.
I think he was the source here of the Egyptian mysteries. They're written in books and given to the priests in the temples. But the real source, of course, of the Egyptian mysteries is with Hermes Trismegistus and was given to the Egyptians. So it is the Egyptian mysteries, but it's more than that.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Scott. Good stuff.
And then Efrosini says, Museus, Museus, is the teacher of Orpheus.
Oh, thanks for that. Okay. And Orpheus is associated with Hermes. I think he was more of a fourth rate type. Hermes among the list is art music, right? And that was, especially music, was the means, you could say, to make it more esoteric, sound, and his ability to draw the vibration down through his lyre, So he was really a master of sound. But he is associated with Hermes. And so, yeah, Mazus. Okay, that's good to know. Anyone else? Okay, next. Among the arts and sciences, which it is affirmed Hermes revealed to mankind, were medicine, chemistry, law, art, astrology, music, rhetoric, magic, philosophy, geography, mathematics, especially geometry, anatomy, and oratory. Is there anything he didn't bring forth? Wallace Budge, hello, come on. Oh, gotta get back in play mode here. So, yeah. Wallace Budge gives us more detail. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Greg, can you read that, please?
From the above facts, it is quite clear that the Greeks were generally correct in the statements which they made about the wisdom and learning of Thoth, whom they identified with their own Hermes. They described him as the inventor of astronomy and astrology, the science of numbers and mathematics, geometry, and land surveying, medicine, and botany. He was the first to found a system of the theology and to organize a settled government in the country. He established the worship of the gods and made rules concerning the times and nature of their sacrifices. He composed the hymns and prayers which men addressed to them and drew up liturgical works. He invented figures and the letters of the alphabet and the arts of reading, writing, and oratory in all its branches. And he was the author of every work on every branch of knowledge, both human and divine.
Okay, so, a really pantheistic type, it seems to me that he literally reintroduced civilization in the ancient Egyptian world, and all aspects that make up civilization, right? The oldest known medical manuscript, believed to have come from the divine Pymander, was found in Egypt in 1872 by the archaeologist George Ebers. HPB describes this papyrus in Isis Unveiled. So we get a firsthand look at of his writings. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Okay, as to their knowledge in medicine, now that one of the lost books of Hermes has been found and translated by George Ebers, the Egyptians can speak for themselves. That they understood about the circulation of the blood appears certain from the healing manipulations of the priests, who knew how to draw blood downward, stop its circulation for a while. A more careful study of their bas reliefs representing scenes taking place in the healing hall of various temples will easily demonstrate it. They had their dentists and occultists, oculists,
There you go.
and no doctor was allowed to practice more than one specialty, which certainly warrants the belief that they lost fewer patients in those days than our physicians do now. Wow.
That's a typical HPB jab. Yeah, I'm sure they also had occultists, but oculists, So very interesting, huh? You would like to be able to explore this further. Okay, next up. Orpheus was similarly acclaimed by the Greeks. In his Masks of God, Volume 4, Joseph Campbell retells a Greek myth that links Hermes to Orpheus. Could we get a reader, please?
Catherine, can you read that, please?
I think so. The tale to be recalled, is that where you'd like me to start?
Yeah. Yes, please.
The tale to be recalled at this point of Hermes' fashioning of the lyre when but an infant, a couple of hours old. Conceived of Zeus, he had been born of a night sky nymph named Maya, meaning old mother, grandmother, foster mother, old nurse, or midwife, but also a certain large kind of crab. In a cave, he had been born at dawn, and toddling forth from his cradle before noon, he had chanced, or had seemed to chance, at the entrance of the cave upon a tortoise, an early animal symbol of the universe, which he broke up and fashioned into a lyre, to which at noon he beautifully sang. That evening he stole Apollo's cattle, and to appease the god gave him the lyre, which Apollo passed to his own son Orpheus. Figure 3 and figure 11. And as the whole world knows, the sound of that lyre in Orpheus' hands stilled the animals of the wilderness, moved trees and rocks, and even charmed the lord of the netherworld when the lover descended alive to the abyss to recover Eurydice, his lost bride.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Can I ask who was the lover descending or whatever?
Let's see. Let me reread this. You can charm the Lord, and there's when the Lord descended alive to the abyss forever. It's when the lover. Well, this is. Oh, hang on a second. This is Orpheus, right?
Yeah, it seems to me that Orpheus is the lover and Eurydice is the lost bride.
Yeah, it's Orpheus who descended, so he's the lover drawn towards the feminine principle, and Eurydice, who always represents the form aspect, and so the spirit aspect was drawn towards the form aspect in order to recover her, meaning to draw the personality up into spirit. Right, that would be the esoteric version, right? But I like this because it links through Greek myth, Hermes and Orpheus directly. Real, to me, key to this is the idea that the tortoise represented the universe, and he broke it up and then refashioned it into a lyre. So the inherent in the lyre is the entire universe. And so he gives a magical method through sound to, you could say, recover the fragmented universe, to take you back towards unity. The Orpheus stuff is always particularly mystical.
Francis?
Yeah.
Efrosini says, and in fact, the legend says that the strings of the lyre were 7, something that reminds us of the 7 rays.
Yeah, absolutely. There you have it, exactly.
And that fits perfectly in with what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, the 1 becoming 7, and then revealing the method to return to the 1, in this case, through the lyre. Okay. Next, Biographia Antigua, which praises Hermes and Pymander, is part of Francis Barrett's opus magnum, The Magus, published in 1801. Interest in the book was revived by Eliphas Levi, which subsequently became famous for its occult charts and illustrations. Any thoughts or questions?
Catherine says, I've done several forms. Go back to that. I've done several forms of sound healing, which both appeal to invoke higher realms, but also are balm for those who are digitally or mentally fried.
Oh, interesting.
She says, causes me to believe in the healing power of sound. Also would refer to Susan Hale's work, Sacred Sound, Sacred Space.
Yeah. Well, there's, the crystal bowls that emanate sounds. I've had experience with those. They can be incredibly calming. Tibetan prayer bowls emanate a type of sound that's scatters negative thought forms and really allows you to focus for meditation. Yeah, and that just touches the very surface, because it's an occult science par excellence, right? Which Orpheus was the master of. He was given the key to it, right? Okay.
I also, before you move on, I just, I've always been fascinated with the sigils of the angels that you've got up there on the top right. And it's similar in the one, the magical seals or talismans on the right there.
Yeah.
If I guess it's like trying to read Sanskrit or Sensar or something, it's just, if you know enough and you've had enough initiations, it's a language to you. And I feel honored that I can read the 1, 2, 3, the fourth line down,
Exactly.
Of course, I can read the first two as well because they're in English, but
exactly. Yeah,
it's
between the fourth and the third line, that's for sure. Indeed.
But it's amazing how symbols can evoke, just like Catherine was talking about with sound, it does the same thing too. So
Yeah, well, I would think that these symbols are at the level of Sinzar. I don't know that for a fact, but it certainly is suggestive of that. And what HPB says about Sinzar is that, and DK2, he mentions it, is that it's self-revealing, right? That if you're at a level that you can contemplate these symbols, or that you can read Sinzar, then they reveal their meaning to you through them. In other words, it's not a question of studying through the lower mind, what each of this means. You could say it's a direct impression, a sigil, symbol of this idea that informs that symbol, right? So, this is the symbolic, energetic impress of Gabrielle, for instance, right? If indeed they are at that high level, but I see no reason to doubt that they are. There may be some errors in them, there may be some blinds thrown in, but certainly if these aren't that high source, there exists a high source that would have a symbolic representation like this. I saw Yvonne's hand.
yeah. Yvonne, go ahead.
I have a couple of things. First, BL, that's with the signs and all that and the astrology. Does that coincide like Sunday? You have Leo and the sun, and Monday the moon, and Pisces, and does that correspond to the days? And
yes.
my second question is, Frances, last time I think somebody stole a page of HB's book because she was supposed to be a spy, and they were trying to read it, remember? And it was in Sensar. And so that was the same type thing. If you're at that level, you can read it. If you're not, I just wondered if BO knew what these things were.
I know what some of them are, and I'd always heard that those were the signatures of the angels, but it makes sense that it's their name in another language as well. But yeah, the table, they correspond to the angels. They correspond to the days of the week. And my understanding of the days of the week is that it was based on Norse tradition, that Wednesday was Odin's day, and we attribute that to Mercury, that Thursday was Thor's day, and we attribute that to Jupiter, that Friday was Frigg's day, and we attribute that to Venus, that Saturday was Saturn's day, and so we attribute that to the planet Saturn, and then the sun and the moon. And that's exactly what they've done here, is put those relationships that are very common in the astrological world.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. And that the next level up would be to look at this sevenfold emanation from the suns, which is the first day, right? And then how that then sequentially emanates through the planets, with Saturn being the seventh, which is, the number always associated with Saturn, and representing, if you remember from a webinar or two ago, the highest gate especially during Greek times, it was considered that highest gate that you pass through, right? So yeah, there's a lot there. A lot of it's hidden or withdrawn, you could say. Yeah, I see, Scott.
Yeah, before that though, Greg says, reminds me of that instrument you play without touching. He says it's a theremin.
A theremin, yes. Remember in the 60s, we were listening to theremins.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
I remember Blavatsky saying it at one point, the days of the week are not in the correct order. The order that we get, that we are using today, is actually the Chaldean order, moving backwards by 3. If you look at the order of the planets and start with, say, Sunday, which was placed in the position of the Earth in the order of the planets out, and you go back 3 days, that takes you to Monday, to the moon day. You go back 3 from that, and it brings you around to Tuesday for Mars and so forth. It's a cycle of the Chaldean days backwards by 3.
Well, that's interesting, huh? And that takes you through the gates sequentially outwards, doesn't it? Is that, at least from what you described, starting with the moon, which is the first gate.
Yeah, it is the order of the planets, but scrambled in perhaps it seems an exoteric way, using the Chaldean order, which is simply what we know, but starting with moon and putting the sun in the Earth's place.
Right. Yeah, heliocentric as opposed to Earth-centric.
Geocentric with the moon
Geocentric is first, heliocentric.
Or Earth and moon first. Yeah.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, good. Okay, next up. Yeah, can we get a reader, please?
Okay, Martha, can you read that, please?
Yes, sorry. His transcendent learning caused Hermes to be identified with many of the early sages and prophets. In his ancient mythology, Bryant writes, I have mentioned that Cadmus was the same as the Egyptian Thoth, and it is manifest from his being Hermes, and from the invention of letters being attributed to him. In the chapter on the theory of Pythagorean mathematics will be found the table of the original Cadmean letters. Investigators believed that it was Hermes who was known to the Jews as Enoch, called by Kenealy the second messenger of God. Hermes was accepted into the mythology of the Greeks, later becoming the Mercury of the Latins. He was revered through the form of the planet Mercury because his body is nearest to the sun. Hermes, of all creatures, was nearest to God. became known as the messenger of the gods. Francis, did this come through appropriation, intuitive thinking, or were there travelers coming from various countries that recognized patterns?
Did what come through?
The Thoth and Hermes being identified as one, since Thoth is Scandinavian, isn't it?
No, it's Egyptian.
Okay.
It's actually originally Ta'ot, which is like T-A with a
Oh,
hyphen A.
A-O-U. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This is sort of the Anglicization of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anglicizing it. Yeah. Yeah, the general flow is that it comes down through an avatar. It's overshadowed. That's the general source of information. Here we have another reference to the second aspect, Enoch, but we'll get to this as we explore. So first up, Hermes' identification with the early sages and prophets. This is a complex subject. We have to keep in mind that, as before stated, there were two Hermes. The first, the god Thoth, identified with the planet Mercury. The second, Hermes Trismegistus, renowned author and teacher. Now, Scott, and in some of the writing we just looked at, it's the first Hermes that is called thrice great. So we'll just hold that. But you can see here, that this is an identification of Hermes Trismegistus. Of course, this is the Greek form. Okay, let's see here. Oliver tells us in his Pythagorean triangle, quote, in the Hermesian system, the ineffable secrets were reputed to have been transmitted through three patriarchs only, namely Adam, Seth, and Enoch, the latter of whom was identified with Hermes himself. This original trinity is mirrored in Buddhist thought. In Faber's Anacalypsis, we learned that, quote, Buddha in Egypt was called Hermes Trismegistus. Lycophron calls him Tricephalus. Cephalus, the root is mind, right? Three-minded, which, is real different than thrice great. It's a more esoteric understanding, because we know through decay the idea of three minds, lower mind, higher mind, and the son of mind. This speaks for itself, as we have seen that Buddha is identified with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Okay, in Greece, according to Hippolytes Philosophumena, Hermes was identified with Attis, the Syrian Adonis, the Egyptian Osiris, the Greek Dionysus, and the Samothracian or Kabiric gods Adamna and Corybas. We've looked at all of these. So why so many cross identities? One reason is that all these great beings were messengers of the gods, an essential aspect of Hermes as Mercury. In addition, we have combinations of gods such as Hermanubis and Hermaphrodite, which focus on specific aspects that are embodied in these combinations. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Yes, Ephrosyne says thricephalus. She says it's three heads.
Yeah. And, as Joni Mitchell will tell you, there are better than one. Actually, it's two heads. But anyway, three heads, three minds. And, as I say, we know from DK teaching that this represents lower mind, son of mind, which is soul. And that highest subplane, the monastic permanent atom or higher mind.
Okay, Scott's got his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, this all ties in, and I wrote to you about this with today being May Day and Beltane, and a cross-quarter day between the solstice and the equinox. But it's also, because this happens in Taurus, the month of May, it's sacred to Buddha as well. And so the connection with Buddha and wisdom and the third ray and Hermes all works together in Taurus, which deals with the enlightened mind.
The enlightened mind.
It's opened, right? And which is also the Ajna center, which is where the Uraeus is, and so on and so forth. This all mushrooms here today in Taurus. And with the celebrations that used to happen with the ancient Celts in Great Britain, where they lit Beltane, these solar fires on the top of hills, and ran their cattle, Taurus, between them.
Yeah, interesting. And I think the Druids also invented the maypole, and it was a very solemn ceremony. You know, now we think of it as, you know, sort of superficially, you know, put some colored paper and tack it up on the top, but it was, you know, making one from the many, you know, this synthesizing aspect. And, you know, we certainly have that in this, what's it called again? Where is it?
There you go. You're getting there.
Yeah, the tricephalus, right? Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, it definitely puts it in context to our time. Any other thoughts about this? Okay, next, Jacob Bryant's book is entitled Antient Mythology, not Ancient Mythology. The MPH occasionally makes some mistakes like this, though the two words mean pretty much the same thing, so it's sort of academic. Next, here it is, Antient Mythology, so in case you were wondering. Next, in the chapter on the theory of Pythagorean mathematics will be found the table of the original Cadmean letters. Here's the table described showing the letters purportedly invented by Hermes, right? Column 6 is here. Marks the letters brought to Greece from Phoenicia by Cadmus. But we'll wait till we're in the chapter on Pythagorean mathematics to study this table. That's what this table is from. Next, Hermes' identification with the Jewish Enoch. Could we get a reader for this short passage from Levi's History of Magic?
And Veronica, can you read that, please?
Enoch would seem to be identical with the Egyptian Hermes Trismegistus, while the famous book of Thoth, written throughout in hieroglyphs and in numbers, would be that occult Bible anterior to the book of Moses and full of mysteries to which the initiated William Postel alludes so frequently throughout his works under the title of the Genesis of Enoch. History of.
Yeah, good. So you can see the connection between the two described a little further here, that it's the occult Bible, right? The book of Thoth. Okay. Next up, can we get a reader? How are we doing on time? We have time.
Michelle, can you read that for us, please? I guess we lost her. Okay, I'll read it. In the Egyptian drawings of him, Thoth carries a waxen writing tablet and serves as the recorder during the weighing of the souls of the dead in the judgment hall of Osiris, a ritual of great significance. Hermes is of first importance to Masonic scholars because he was the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals, which were borrowed from the mysteries established by Hermes. Nearly all of the Masonic symbols are Hermetic in character. Pythagoras studied mathematics with the Egyptians and from them gained his knowledge of the symbolic geometric solids. Hermes is also revered for his reformation of the calendar system. He increased the year from 360 to 365 days, thus establishing a precedent which still prevails. The appellation thrice greatest was given to Hermes because he was considered the greatest of all philosophers, the greatest of all priests, and the greatest of all kings. It is worthy of note that the last poem of America's beloved poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, was a lyric ode to Hermes.
Thank you, Bial. Any thoughts, observations, questions about this passage before we get into it? Okay, first, in the Egyptian drawing of him, Thoth carries a waxen writing tablet and serves as a recorder during the weighing of the souls of the dead in the judgment hall of Osiris, a ritual of great significance. So we looked at a similar illustration earlier. Here, Budge focuses on the actual words of the Book of the Dead. Could we get a reader, please?
Lan, can you read that, please?
Anubis says, O ye who bring words true or false to me, remember that it is Thoth who weigheth them. Concerning Osiris, we read, when the weighing of words taketh place, he smiteth evil, he hath a right heart, and he holdeth the words in the scales in the holy place, wherein the trial of the secret things of the spirits taketh place. It is the God who riseth, who hath made all the beings who are in the Tuat.
Okay, yeah. So this is, straight Egyptology, to direct translation, right? From Budge. Whenever you get a quote from Budge, you're looking at an academic approach. So we have studied this idea somewhat. Remember the idea of the feather and the heart. And Ma'at with her feather at the top, and the weighing of the heart against this feather. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question? Is that
Of
okay? So my question was, what is the significance of being reminded that Thoth is the one who weighs them? If Mot is
Okay, let's take a look at that. Anubis says, "Oh, you bring words true or false to me. Remember that it is Thoth who weigheth them." So he's referring to you could call it the Akashic source, right? The source of the record of your deeds, really. I think that's all there is to it. Does anybody else have any ideas here?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's okay. Next, Hermes is of first importance to Masonic scholars because he was the author of the Masonic initiatory rites, which were borrowed from the mysteries established by Hermes. Note that MPH does not say that Freemasonry, as it is practiced today, began in Egypt. Let's take a look at the entry on Hermes from the Royal Masonic Cyclopedia of History, Rites, Symbolism, and Biography. Can we get a reader?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Hermes is generally referred to in the old manuscripts as one of the founders of Masonry. Should it ever be proved, as some suspect, that modern masonry is only a rifaficamento, recasting or adaptation of the ancient Egyptian mysteries derived through the alchemists, Hermes should occupy no inconsiderable position. At any rate, Hermes is regarded as an individual, and the Grand Lodge manuscript especially says, the same Hermerians was afterwards called Hermes, the father of wisdom. He found one of the two pillars of stone and found the science written thereon, and he taught it to other men.
Okay, so very early reference, one of the earliest cyclopedias of Masonry references him in this way. Do you have any comments about that, Scott?
No, I know the connection with Hermes back there. I've not seen this quote before.
Yeah, so it's this idea that it's a recasting or adaptation. You could also call it, this word is rifacimento. It's you could also look at this as meaning a reimagining, but that doesn't mean just making it up. It could be very directly inspired. In fact, I tend to think that's true. If DK often refers to the Masonic rituals, so they have a source in truth, and I have no doubt that they are connected, whether or not it's form and letter, probably not, but in terms of the spirit of them, I would think there is a deep connection.
Oh, I'm certain of it.
Yeah,
That's so, and they were given out as an experiment through the Masonic to keep the ancient mystery school symbolism, principles, whatever, alive, but turn into different types of symbols. It's twisted, turned some, and Masonry has not really understood that, but it carries the flame for the new candle. It's for the rebirth of the mysteries. Masonry supposedly has that light still in it.
Yeah, we have to remember that the hierarchical lodge, the Blue Lodge, is patterned. Now it's the other way around, isn't it? It is the source of the pattern that is the extant in outer Masonry, right? And the positions at the different directions and the offices are mirrored in these higher lodges, including the lodge on Sirius. So there's definitely a connection.
But yeah, and DK refers to it as the Blue Lodge on Sirius, and you go, well, all right, that's of a pretty high order to be reflecting down.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, if you need more verification, there it is. Okay, so next up, wait a minute. So next, nearly all the Masonic symbols are Hermetic in character. We read that. I guess what I had in mind is to also read this connected with the last passage. Can we get a reader for this?
Catherine, can you read that, please?
Sure. We know that the timeline, sorry, I just got a message, so I'm trying to wait. We know that the timeline of alchemical science weaved its way from Egypt to Greece with Pythagoras, Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle as its disciples. It then spread through the major religions via the respective sects, the Essenes, the Sufi, Jewish Kabbalists, and the Knights Templar. It reached the echelons of Renaissance England to be embraced by luminaries such as Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, and Elias Ashmole, and in turn, the Royal Society. It was plainly obvious to those who had studied the mysteries that this civilized version was in fact the old initiation rituals revamped. This recognition was widespread. In Europe, free thinkers, philosophers, and magicians joined Freemasonry in their droves.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so this is Philippa Folks, who is interesting, as a woman, has really involved herself in Masonic history, including this book, The Masonic Magician, which is a book on the life of Count Cagliostro. Yeah.
And Veronica says, wasn't Cagliostro an other incarnation of Blavatsky?
Yeah, the one immediately before. So yes, that is true. Well, we're out of time, folks. We'll start here next time with this comment. And you want to announce times? We have a little different thing going on than usual.
Yes. Next week, we have Secret Doctrine because the conference starts right after that. So on 8 May, we start at 7 p.m. for the Secret Doctrine, so 1 week. And then the next Secret Teaching of All Ages is right on schedule. It's 5 June. Okay. Now, Francis, hold on. I'm going to, yes, and Veronica says in the seed webinar. The seed webinar is on the 7th. She means the 10 seed groups.
Uh-huh.
That's at 7. David Hopper does that. So
Right, Saturday.
thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that reminder. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now and then say goodbye to everybody. But Francis, please stay. I need to talk to you with Anne and Efrosini about translations for the conference.